Hello there. Welcome to Whispers.exe, where the silence watches back. The following story is a work of fiction, created for atmospheric and entertainment purposes. Before the shadows whisper your name, hit that subscribe button. With that being said, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the dark settle in. It begins like most things do, quiet, unnoticed, and far too late to stop. Red, white, and gone. It was supposed to be just another barbecue, just like every year. The summer air was thick with the smell of charcoal and the sharp tang of ketchup that always clung to the air long after the picnic tables had been cleared. The 4th of July had always been a holiday rooted in the mundane, a time for fireworks, greasy hamburgers, and the laughter of relatives gathered beneath the hot sun. This year, however, something felt off. It was subtle at first, like the faintest hum in the background of a song. Nothing you could really place, but still there. The day started like any other. The children were running around, their shrill voices cutting through the warmth of the afternoon. Their laughter bounced off the worn wooden fences, which had seen more than their fair share of barbecues. The adults sat around the picnic tables, too tired from the heat to do anything more than sip on beers and nod along to the conversation. But there was a moment, right as the sun dipped lower and the evening glow stretched its fingers across the backyard, when I noticed him. My cousin. He stood apart from the others, leaning against the far side of the garage, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his faded red jacket. He wasn't eating. He wasn't laughing. Not in the way you'd expect. But he was there. He had to be. I thought nothing of it at first. It was a reunion, after all, a long, drawn-out affair where conversations would flow from topic to topic, and people would drift in and out of the circle. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was that feeling you get when you turn your back on something and for just a moment, you know it's staring at you, watching you. I shook it off. It was hot. Maybe I was just tired. The family reunion was a familiar, safe thing. Nothing out of the ordinary had ever happened. Then, when it came time to take the picture, that's when I saw it. The photo was one of those wide, candid shots we always took. It was meant to be a snapshot of a perfect moment. Everyone crammed together, standing shoulder to shoulder, all of us smiling like nothing could ever go wrong. There was a kind of artificial cheeriness to it, but that was how these things always were. You smile, you stand, you pretend everything is perfect, even if it isn't. But then there was that one detail, my cousin's face, the one person who shouldn't have been in the picture, the one face I couldn't make sense of. His head was tilted away, eyes half closed, his mouth frozen in a smile that seemed too wide, too unnatural. But the thing that bothered me most was how the rest of his features were blurred, distorted. It wasn't like the blur of someone moving too quickly or being out of focus. It was something else. It was as if his face didn't belong in the picture at all, like the camera had refused to capture it in any detail. I told myself it was nothing. I tried to laugh it off, make a joke about how the lighting had been weird or that my phone was acting up, but when I checked the photo on my screen, I knew it wasn't just a glitch. His face was there, but it wasn't. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't have been possible. I showed the picture to a few others. No one seemed to notice anything wrong with it. They didn't see the blur. They didn't see what I saw. That night, we all went to bed, the hum of the crickets outside drifting through the open windows. The sound of it was constant, unchanging, like a soft whisper you couldn't escape. But the morning was when the strange events began to unravel, one small thread at a time. When I woke up, I found myself standing at the kitchen counter, staring at my cup of coffee, trying to remember the details of the evening before. The others were already awake, milling about in the living room, talking in quiet voices. I asked one of my cousins, the older one, about the photo from the night before. I mentioned how strange it was, how blurry my cousin's face had been. Her response was immediate. "What are you talking about?" she asked, a frown crossing her face. "You know the photo from last night," I repeated. "The group shot." She stared at me for a long time, and then she laughed. "What are you talking about?" "There was no photo last night. We didn't take one." I thought she was joking. I must have misheard her, or maybe the heat had gotten to me. But when I checked the phone in my pocket, the photo was gone, completely erased. Not a trace of it. It was as if the file had never existed in the first place. "Hey, where's my cousin?" I asked, glancing around the room. Everyone seemed to be accounted for, but he wasn't there. My cousin, the one from the photo. I asked my aunt where he was. She gave me a confused look, her brow furrowing. "Which cousin?" she asked. I pointed to where he had been sitting the night before. "He was here last night," I insisted. "He was eating and laughing with us." Her face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't invite him this year." The room grew colder, the air thick with a tension I couldn't place. I felt a coldness creeping under my skin. Was it possible I had imagined it all? No, I knew what I had seen. I had seen him, heard him. He had been there. The more I asked, the more confused the family became. My aunt insisted that no such cousin had been invited, and when I pressed her, she looked almost frightened, like something deep inside her mind was resisting the very mention of him. As the hours passed, the memories began to warp. My parents, who I had seen talking to him just hours before, claimed they had no recollection of meeting him. The more I tried to ask, the less they seemed to remember. It was as if they had all forgotten his very existence, as if the memory of him had been wiped clean, like chalk on a blackboard. I tried to reach out to him. I checked his phone number, tried to dial it, but no one answered. The line was always busy. The more I searched for any trace of him, the more it felt like he had never existed. And when I spoke his name aloud, it left a metallic taste in my mouth, like something foul and wrong. It felt unnatural, like a name that shouldn't be spoken, that shouldn't belong to anyone. I drove out to his house, desperate for answers. But when I arrived, the place was empty. The windows were shut tight, the grass in the yard overgrown, the mailbox was full, but no one was home. The neighbors didn't remember him either, not his face, not his name. They couldn't recall a single detail. The days blurred together after that. The sense of unease gnawed at me like a constant, quiet hunger. The feeling that something had been lost, something crucial, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't grasp it. I kept thinking back to that moment in the photograph. The way his face had been blurred, like it was too wrong for the camera to capture, like he had never belonged in the picture at all. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized maybe he had never belonged in the family either. Maybe he was never meant to be remembered. The silence in the days that followed was deafening. It stretched out, hanging over everything like a fog, slowly seeping into my thoughts. I tried to focus on work, on the small, normal things that once made up the rhythm of my life, but the presence of his absence lingered. It wasn't just a lack, it was something worse, something missing, but still there. The odd sensation of being watched, like when you're sure someone's behind you, but when you turn, there's no one there. I began noticing small, strange things. My memories of that night began to fray at the edges like old photographs fading in the sun. I couldn't remember the exact sequence of events. I couldn't remember the last time I saw him standing at the garage or the last time I spoke to him. The details became cloudy. His voice, once clear in my mind, grew fainter and fainter until it felt like a whisper at the edge of my thoughts. I went through my old messages, the ones I'd sent to him years ago, and found them all missing. He had never texted me, never called, not once. The threads of our past of any connection had vanished. The only thing that remained was that photo, the one I couldn't explain. The one where his face was blurred, eyes closed, smile stretching too wide. I tried calling him again, but this time the number didn't even ring. The line went straight to voicemail. And every time I tried to recall him to someone else, it was like my words were slipping through their fingers. They would smile, nod, and then forget. It wasn't even that they were pretending. It was as if they had never known him at all. His name had become a kind of poison. The moment it was spoken aloud, it twisted in the air, leaving a sour taste behind, like metal on the tongue. The strangest part was how, the longer I thought about it, the less I was able to remember about him. His face, his smile, his laugh, everything seemed to drift further away. All I had left was that feeling, that unsettling weight in the pit of my stomach, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't understand, something I shouldn't understand. I couldn't even remember the last time I saw him laugh. Was he really there that night? Was he laughing with the others, or was I simply fooling myself? I drove to the family reunion spot, the place where it had all happened, hoping that maybe, just maybe, something there would give me a clue. The house looked just the same. The faded red bricks, the slanting roof, the cracked sidewalk where the kids used to run, but the trees seemed different, taller somehow, their shadows longer. The air was thick with humidity, oppressive in a way that I couldn't quite place. The backyard, where the barbecue had been set up, was empty, quiet. The grill was still standing, charred from the night's festivities, the rusted metal lid hanging slightly ajar. But there were no smells, no sounds of people, of life. The place felt hollow, empty, like it was waiting for something that wasn't coming. I walked around the yard, my feet crunching on the dry grass, and looked for any sign that he had been here. Maybe a trace of his presence would linger, something to give me some answers. But there was nothing. Nothing but that same oppressive silence. I went inside. My family's old home still familiar, the scent of stale wood and old furniture, the worn couch with the cracked cushions. But even this place, so full of memories, felt strange. It felt wrong. Like the air was thick, too thick, like it didn't want to let anything breathe freely. I sat down on the old couch, staring at the walls, trying to collect myself. But all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, that constant, low buzz. It was the kind of sound that should have been comforting, but in that moment, it felt like an intrusion, like it was pushing against the edges of my thoughts, filling in the spaces where my memories had been. And then, as I sat there, I felt it, a coldness, a presence in the room, like something was watching me from the corner of my eye. But when I turned, there was nothing. Nothing but the faint shimmer of the sunlight coming through the window, casting long shadows across the carpet. I don't know how long I sat there. It felt like hours, but it couldn't have been. The clocks on the walls seemed to tick slower now, their movements thick and sluggish, like time itself was dragging its feet. I went back to the photo, the one I had tried so hard to forget, the one where his face was blurred, distorted, like it didn't belong there. I opened it again, zooming in on the figure. His head tilted away, the empty smile on his face too wide, his eyes closed. But as I stared at it, something strange happened. The blur began to shift. It wasn't static anymore. The edges of his face started to take form, but not in the way I had expected. The more I focused, the more the blur became sharper, clearer. And then, just for a moment, his face was in focus. But it wasn't his face. It was someone else's. Someone I didn't recognize. The features were twisted, wrong. It looked like something had taken his face, molded it, and left only the shadows of a person behind. I pulled away from the screen, my breath catching in my throat. I shut the phone off, but I couldn't escape it. The feeling, the presence was still there, pressing in on me from every side. And I realized for the first time that it wasn't just the photo that was wrong, it was everything. I left the house that day, and as I drove back, I thought I saw him again, standing at the side of the road. But when I slowed down, there was nothing there, only the road. I spent the next few days in a haze. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept replaying the events over and over in my head, each time the image of his blurred face becoming more and more real, more and more vivid in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that something had been taken from me, from all of us. I reached out to my cousin's parents, the ones who had raised him. I told them everything. The photo, the disappearance, his name. I expected them to be as confused as I was to search for answers, but they didn't remember him either. They didn't know who I was talking about. It was as if he had never existed at all. I started to question everything. Had I imagined it all? Was I losing my mind? No, I knew what I had seen, I knew what I had felt, but the more I searched, the less I could find. His name, his face, the sound of his voice, they all started to slip away, like water through my fingers. The more I tried to hold on to them, the faster they disappeared. And that's when I realized the truth. It wasn't that he had never been real, it was that he had never belonged. He had never been a part of our family. He had been something else, something that had come in from the outside, something that had worn his skin and pretended to be him. And now, whatever it was gone. Gone, like it had never been there at all. I still don't know what happened that night. I don't know if he was real, I don't know if he was a person, or if he was something worse. But I know this. Some things are meant to be forgotten. Some things are better left to the silence. Some things never belonged, and they're never coming back. Days passed, and the world seemed to continue, indifferent to the strange emptiness I felt. My life had returned to a kind of rhythm, but it was hollow. The family reunion, the barbecues, the chatter, it all felt distant, as if it had never happened at all. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't shake the lingering sensation of being watched, of being trapped inside a memory that didn't belong to me. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was standing at the edge of something vast and incomprehensible, a darkness just beyond my reach. I began avoiding family gatherings. The people I had once laughed with, shared stories with, now felt like strangers. My own mind was betraying me, refusing to hold on to the memories that should have been solid and real. The more I pushed, the more everything seemed to slip through my fingers. Even the simplest of conversations with my parents felt strained, distant, like they too were starting to forget. And then, one night, it happened again. I was alone in my room, the dim light from my lamp casting long shadows across the walls, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone walking through the house. Footsteps, soft but deliberate. I froze, my breath caught in my throat as I listened. The steps were slow, careful. They weren't the sound of someone moving about the house in the normal way. It was deliberate, like someone was trying to be quiet. I waited, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped. A chill ran down my spine, and I knew I wasn't alone. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The footsteps started again, this time closer, closer to my door. The sound of them was unnerving, as though the person, if it was a person, was deliberately trying to remain unseen. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get up, to leave, but I couldn't. My body felt paralyzed, as if some invisible force was holding me in place. The door creaked, just slightly. I held my breath, my hand clenching the sheets beneath me, and then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a voice, but it was so faint, so soft that I almost couldn't be sure. It was a whisper, a name, my cousin's name. I blinked, the sound echoing in my mind, but when I looked around, the room was empty. My door was still closed. There was nothing there. I pushed myself out of bed, my limbs stiff with fear, and opened the door cautiously. The house was dark, the silence suffocating. I turned on the hallway light and walked slowly through the rooms. The kitchen was empty, the living room still. No one. But the cold feeling was still there, pressing against my chest, as though something was hiding just out of view, watching. I checked my phone again, desperately searching for something, anything to distract myself from the growing panic in my chest. But as I scrolled, something caught my eye, an alert, an old message, a name. The message was from an unknown number. It was short, barely more than a few words. He's waiting for you. I stared at the screen, my heart stopping. I had never received that message. It was dated from the night of the reunion, but I had no memory of it. No recollection of any such text. No idea who had sent it. The sender was listed as a random number, but when I clicked on the contact, it came up blank. My blood ran cold. The words blurred before my eyes, twisting in a way that made my stomach churn. He's waiting for you. I looked around the room again, the unsettling feeling pressing against my chest. It was as if something invisible was sitting just beside me, breathing softly in the dark. I left the house soon after. I had to. The house had become a place of unbearable tension, each corner, each shadow, hiding something I could no longer understand. I drove aimlessly, not caring where I went, not caring about anything anymore, except the overwhelming need to get away from the emptiness that seemed to follow me. I drove through streets I didn't recognize, the neon lights flickering like distant stars in a darkened sky. The roads were deserted, save for the occasional car passing by, its headlights casting long shadows against the pavement. But even in the vastness of the night, I felt trapped. I pulled over at a gas station. The flickering lights overhead felt like a beacon in the void. I stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at my skin, and walked toward the small convenience store. The low hum of the refrigerator units echoed through the quiet. Inside, the cashier looked at me for a moment, then returned to his task, uninterested. I walked the aisles, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't control. It was then that I saw the tabloid magazine sitting on the counter, the headline staring back at me: Disappearance or Death, the Family Mystery That Never Was. I picked it up without thinking, the cold pages heavy in my hands. There, on the front cover, was a familiar face. It was my cousin's face, but it wasn't. It was the blurry face from the photo, the one that shouldn't have existed. The caption read, Unsolved Case of a Lost Family Member. Who was he? I felt my throat close as I stared at the photo. How was this possible? This magazine, this story, why was it here now? Why was it following me? The cashier glanced at me as I stared at the photo, then seemed to take notice of the horror in my eyes. You all right? He asked, his voice low, unbothered. I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. All I could do was turn and leave, the magazine still in my hand, its weight unbearable, pressing down on my chest. I stumbled back to the car, throwing the door open and sitting in the driver's seat. The magazine fell to the passenger side, its pages still wide open, staring back at me with that eerie, blurred face. I couldn't escape it. No matter how far I ran, no matter how many miles I drove, it followed me. When I returned home, I burned the magazine. I burned it in the backyard, watching the flames twist and crackle as it turned to ash. I watched until the fire had consumed it completely, and only embers remained. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that it would never be over. That night, I had a dream. I was at the family reunion again, but it was different. The air was thick, pressing against me, suffocating. The laughter of my relatives was distant, muffled, as if I was underwater. I walked around the backyard, but the shadows seemed deeper, darker, pulling at the edges of my vision. And then I saw him, my cousin. He was standing near the garage again, but this time his face was clear. His eyes were open, but they weren't his eyes. They were dark, endless, and they seemed to follow me, pulling me toward him. His smile was stretched too wide, the skin around his mouth cracked and raw, like something had torn it open. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I could only stand there, paralyzed, as he reached out toward me, his fingers long and impossibly thin, curling around the air. And then he spoke. His voice was a whisper, soft and hollow. You've forgotten me, haven't you? The words echoed in my ears as his hand touched my face, cold and clammy, like ice against my skin. I woke up with a start, gasping for breath, my body drenched in sweat, but it wasn't over. I could still hear the whispers. They were there, just beneath the surface, like a presence that refused to leave. I could feel his eyes on me, even now, even here. He wasn't gone. He never had been. He was still waiting for me, always watching. And I had no idea how to escape. The days passed, but they didn't feel real. They passed through me, rather than around me. I couldn't find any comfort in my own home, in the places that should have felt safe. The shadows were no longer just shadows. They had weight, substance, like they were waiting to move when I wasn't looking. The walls of my house closed in on me, the air growing stale with every passing moment, as if the space I occupied was a place I wasn't meant to inhabit. I started avoiding mirrors. I couldn't stand to look at myself. Each time I caught my reflection, something about it didn't seem right. It was as if I wasn't truly there, like I was an observer of my own life, not the one living it. My face seemed too hollow, too distant, and it wasn't just that. It was something more. Subtle. Something that lingered just below the surface of my skin, pressing outward, desperate to be seen. I couldn't sleep. I would lay in bed, wide awake, the room spinning with every heartbeat. The minutes stretched into hours. The silence in my room was deafening. The whispering in the back of my mind never stopped, not even for a moment. It gnawed at me, telling me things that made no sense but felt more and more true with each passing second. One night, just as I thought I might go mad from the oppressive stillness, I decided to drive again. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to leave, to escape the suffocating grip of my own thoughts. I drove far aimlessly as the road stretched out before me like an endless black ribbon in the night. The headlights carved out only small pockets of the road ahead, but even those pockets seemed to shift, to move, as though the darkness was closing in on me. I turned down roads I didn't recognize, past houses I had never seen before, and yet there was something familiar about it all. The air outside was still, the wind didn't move, the trees didn't rustle. It was a silence that felt wrong, unnatural, as though nature itself was holding its breath. And then I saw it, a sign in the distance, barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights. I couldn't read it at first, but as I drew closer, the words became clear. Welcome to Briarwood. I'd never heard of Briarwood. I didn't recognize the name, didn't remember passing any signs. But somehow, I felt compelled to turn onto the road that led into the town. It was as if the town had been waiting for me. The road into Briarwood was narrow, twisting, almost claustrophobic, as though the trees were leaning in from both sides, trying to obscure the path. I could barely make out the shapes of buildings in the distance, their outlines softened by the thick fog that had settled in the valley. I pulled into the first clearing I saw, parking in front of a small rundown convenience store that seemed to have been abandoned for years. The lights inside flickered like dying fireflies, casting a dim, sickly glow on the cracked pavement. I got out of the car and the familiar coldness creep up my spine as I stepped onto the ground. The air was heavier here, dense with something that I couldn't name, but I could feel it pressing down on me, like something was waiting just beyond my sight. The door to the store creaked as I pushed it open, and I was greeted by a dry, stale smell of rot. The shelves inside were barren, except for a few faded items that had long since passed their expiration dates. The cashier behind the counter didn't even acknowledge me, his eyes fixed on something that wasn't there. I hesitated for a moment, trying to make sense of the place. There was something eerily familiar about the scene. It was like I had seen it before, in a dream, maybe? The same dull light, the same empty shelves. And then I saw it. A picture on the wall behind the cashier. It was an old photograph, yellowed with age, of a family standing in front of a house. There was something about it that stopped me in my tracks, something I couldn't explain. The family in the photo looked almost familiar, but it wasn't the faces that unsettled me, it was the background. Behind them, in the shadows of the house, was a figure, a blurry shape, almost indistinguishable, but its form seemed too tall, too elongated. And there, just beneath the figure's outstretched arm, was a familiar face. A face I knew, a face that shouldn't have been there. My cousin's face. But this time it wasn't blurry, it wasn't distorted, it was clear, as if it had been drawn into the scene intentionally. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my body frozen in place. How could he be in that photo? How could he be in Briarwood, a town I had never heard of before? I turned around, the walls pressing in on me, the air thick with the same stifling silence that had followed me for days. I needed to leave. I needed to get out. As I stepped back toward the door, something stopped me. The figure from the photograph, it had moved. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. The cashier was still staring into space, but now the photograph was different. The blurry figure behind the family was no longer a shadow. It was standing upright, its face clear and unmistakable. My cousin. His eyes were wide open now, staring out of the photo. But they weren't his eyes. They were black. Endless, the same hollow eyes I had seen in my dream. His smile was stretched too wide, jagged, as if it had been forced into place. I backed away, stumbling over the worn floorboards as I tried to escape, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked, but there was no key, no handle. It was as if the store had become a prison, trapping me inside with the figure from the photo. The lights flickered, and I turned, heart pounding in my chest. He was there. The figure. The blurry, distorted figure from the photo. Only now it was no longer a shape. It had form. It had a face. It was him. My cousin. But not the one I had known. This one was different, wrong in ways I couldn't describe. His body was stretched and malformed, his limbs too long, his skin a sickly gray that seemed to pulse and shift. He reached out toward me, his fingers elongating, the nails sharp like claws. "Why did you forget me?" he whispered, the words coming from everywhere at once, reverberating in my mind. I turned, frantic, and slammed my fists against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The figure loomed closer, its face twisted into something grotesque, and the store around me seemed to distort, stretching and warping, as if the very fabric of reality was bending. "I was always here," he said, his voice low, deep, like a distant echo. "You just couldn't see me." The room spun, my vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. The figure reached for me, and I screamed. When I woke up, I was back in my car. The fog had lifted and the town of Briarwood was gone. There was nothing but the empty road ahead of me, the night swallowing everything in its wake. I tried to shake the remnants of the dream from my mind. I had to, but the feeling lingered. The voice, the face, the sense that something had been watching me, waiting for me all along. I don't know if Briarwood was real. I don't know if it was just another dream, another layer of the nightmare that had been following me. But I know this: the whispers didn't stop. They still follow me, just out of reach, like shadows I can't outrun. And every night, when the silence falls, I hear him again, my cousin, and I know he's still waiting for me. The nights became harder to endure. It wasn't just the whispering. It wasn't just the eerie silence that pressed in on me, wrapping its cold fingers around my chest. It was the certainty that something was changing, something that I couldn't understand but knew I couldn't escape. Each night I lay in bed. The shadows grew longer, the darkness deeper. I could feel it now, seeping into the corners of my home, curling up at the edges of every room, every crevice. I tried to tell myself it was just my mind, that everything I'd seen and heard was just a product of stress, of the lack of sleep, the anxiety that had taken root inside me. But deep down, I knew better. The feeling, the presence, the cold touch of something just beyond my vision. It was too real to ignore. The whispers became more insistent. They would call my name in the dead of night, faint and distant, just out of reach. Sometimes I thought I could hear them during the day, too, low murmurs beneath the sound of the wind or when the leaves rustled outside. My mind would race to the window, my heart pounding in my chest, but when I looked, there was nothing. Only the same empty street, the same empty world. I tried to reach out to people, to talk to friends, to family, but each time I found myself alone. No one seemed to understand. They would nod and smile, offering empty reassurances, but I could tell they didn't see it. They didn't feel it. They hadn't seen what I'd seen. That's when I started to wonder if I had imagined it all. Maybe I had gone mad. Maybe this was all a hallucination, a creation of my own mind, breaking down from the pressure. But even that thought terrified me. Because if it wasn't real, if it was all in my head, then why did it feel so tangible? Why did it feel so much like a presence, something I couldn't outrun, something that was already inside of me? I tried to sleep, but each time I closed my eyes, the dream would return. The figures in the dark, the blurred face, my cousin, or whatever had taken his shape. I would wake up, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. The image of his twisted face burned into my mind. I could see it, feel it, like he was standing in the room with me, his hollow eyes fixed on me, his mouth stretching impossibly wide, forcing that smile into a grotesque imitation of humanity. And I began to realize something else, something horrifying. It wasn't just the figure in the photo. It wasn't just the ghost of a family member. It was something worse. It was the thing that had taken my cousin's place. It was the thing that had always been there, hidden just behind the mask, wearing his face and pretending to be him. And now it wanted more. It wanted me. The first time I saw it again, I wasn't prepared. I had been pacing the house, trying to shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me, trying to ignore the whispers that seemed to follow me from room to room. I stopped in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, trying to steady myself, to hold on to some shred of reality. But my reflection didn't look right. For a brief, fleeting moment, my face shifted. My features blurred and distorted, and I saw, no, I felt it was him, my cousin, but not. His smile stretched wide across my face, his hollow eyes staring back at me, and I could feel something sharp and cold pressing into my skin, like his fingers were reaching through the mirror, touching me, claiming me. I stumbled back, the air knocked from my lungs, and the reflection returned to normal. But the damage was done. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing. The space around me seemed to shift, grow colder, as though it wasn't mine anymore. I ran from the mirror, ran from the house, not knowing where I was going, only knowing that I couldn't stay. I drove aimlessly, the engine roaring in my ears, but the road seemed endless. The farther I drove, the more I felt the weight of the presence, like it was clinging to me, dragging me back. The whispers continued, low and insistent, crawling into my mind with every turn. I didn't know where I was going, but I ended up back in Briarwood. It wasn't a conscious decision. I didn't mean to drive there, didn't mean to return to the town that had haunted my dreams. But there I was, standing in front of that same rundown convenience store, the same cracked pavement beneath my feet, the same flickering lights overhead. The air was thick, oppressive, as if it had been waiting for me. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding, but then the door creaked open of its own accord, and I stepped inside. This time, the store was different. The shelves, once barren, were now filled with strange, unsettling items. Old dolls, their faces cracked and hollow, lined the shelves. There were books with no titles, their pages yellowed with age, and in the back, the same photograph of my family reunion was there. But this time it was different. This time, there was no blur. This time, my cousin's face was clear. I could see it. I could see him standing in the background of the photo, his smile wide and twisted, his eyes black and endless. And behind him in the shadows was something worse. It was the figure that had been in the background, the one that had never belonged in the photo, the one that had never belonged in the family. It was standing there, a long, shadowed form, its face twisted into something inhuman, something that didn't belong in the world. I stumbled back, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. I tried to turn and leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. The cashier was still standing at the counter, staring at me, his eyes empty, as though he were waiting for something. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The room closed in on me. The walls seemed to shift, to bend, as though the store was a living thing, pulling me in, trapping me. And then I heard it, the voice soft and low, echoing from the corners of the room, filling my mind. "I've been waiting for you," it whispered. The figure stepped forward, its shape shifting as it came closer. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Its limbs were too long, too thin, its body twisted and warped, the skin shifting like it was made of smoke. And then I saw it clearly. It wasn't my cousin anymore. It was the thing that had worn his face, the thing that had always been there, waiting. And it was coming for me. The air grew colder. The light above flickered, casting the room into a dim, sickly glow. The thing reached out for me, its fingers long and pale, the nails sharp like daggers. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. My legs were frozen, my feet glued to the floor. It was close now. I could feel its breath on my skin, cold and rancid, like it had been waiting in the shadows for years, feeding off the fear I had been too blind to see. Its smile stretched wide, impossibly wide, as its black eyes bored into mine, searching for something. "You're not leaving," it whispered, its voice thick with malice. "Not until I'm done with you." And then it reached out and touched my face. The contact was cold, too cold, like death itself was pressing into my skin. The world around me spun, and then everything went black. I woke up in my bed, the morning light creeping through the window. I was sweating, shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. The room felt too quiet, too still. I was alive, but the nightmare had followed me. It had crossed the line from dream to reality. I tried to shake it off. I tried to tell myself it was just another dream, just another figment of my imagination. But the feeling, the cold, suffocating feeling, lingered, pressing down on me. And I knew it was not over. It would never be over. He was still waiting, and so was the thing that had taken his place, always watching, always waiting. I tried to shake off the lingering sensation, the cold touch that still clung to my skin, but it wouldn't leave. No matter how much I told myself it was just another nightmare, I knew the truth. The nightmare wasn't over. It wasn't just in my mind. It was real. The whispers had followed me back from Briarwood. They followed me everywhere. I couldn't escape them. No matter where I went, no matter how far I tried to run, they were there, crawling just beneath the surface of my thoughts, like a constant hum in the background. Too quiet to ignore, but too loud to forget. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't explain it. Who would believe me? My family? My friends? They would just think I was crazy, that I had lost touch with reality. But I knew. I knew what was real. I had seen it, felt it, and I could feel it creeping closer every day. The walls of my house, once familiar, now felt like a prison. The air was thick, oppressive, and every time I walked through a doorway, I felt the weight of something behind me, following me, watching me. The silence pressed in on me from all sides, smothering me until I could hardly breathe. And then one day, it happened again. I was sitting in my living room, staring out the window, trying to calm my racing thoughts when I heard it. A sound, faint at first, but unmistakable. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. They were coming from upstairs, but no one was in the house with me. I was alone. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood up, my legs shaky, my breath shallow. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was frozen in place, trapped in my own house, my own mind, knowing that whatever was out there was coming closer. The footsteps began again, this time louder, closer, echoing through the empty house. And then I heard it. A voice, soft and low, calling my name. But it wasn't a voice I recognized. It was wrong, hollow, empty. Come closer, it whispered. Come see me. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping so fast I could see my breath misting in front of me. I knew I shouldn't go upstairs. I knew that whatever was waiting for me was not something I could confront, not something I could ever understand. But I couldn't help myself. The whispers were too insistent, too demanding. I took a step forward, then another, my feet dragging as if some invisible force was pulling me toward the stairs. My hand trembled as I reached for the banister, the wood cold beneath my fingers. And as I climbed the stairs, the house seemed to close in around me. The walls were pressing against me, the ceiling lowering, the air growing thick, suffocating. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. I reached the top of the stairs, my legs weak, my mind racing. I could feel it now, standing just beyond the threshold of the room at the end of the hallway. I could feel its presence, like a weight in the air, a cold pressure that pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. And then I saw it. In the darkness of the room, a figure stood, barely visible in the low light. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs too long, too thin. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could see the outline of its features, twisted, distorted. It was the thing that had worn my cousin's face, but now it was something more, something worse. It had no eyes, just empty sockets, dark and endless. Its smile stretched impossibly wide, jagged and broken, as if its mouth had been forced open. It tilted its head, its movements slow, deliberate, as if it were studying me. The whispers, which had been soft before, now filled my ears, overwhelming me. They were no longer just whispers, they were voices. 1,000 voices, all speaking at once, all calling my name, demanding my attention. Why did you forget me? The figure whispered, its voice low and guttural. Why did you abandon me? The air felt like it was closing in, the walls bending, twisting, as if the house itself was becoming part of the thing in front of me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare into the darkness of its face, into the empty sockets where eyes should have been, and feel the weight of its presence pressing down on me, filling my mind with horror. You were never meant to remember, it said, its voice now a low growl. You were never meant to know. The figure reached out, its hands stretching toward me, long fingers curling like claws. I felt a coldness seep into my skin as it touched me, its fingers pressing against my face, cold and clammy, like death itself was touching me. And then I saw it. In the shadows behind the figure, a door. A door I had never seen before. It was cracked open, just a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. Something was behind it, something waiting for me. The figure's smile widened, its face contorting into something even more grotesque, something that didn't belong in this world. Come closer, it whispered again, its voice 1,000 knives in my mind. Come see what's behind the door. I tried to pull away, but its grip tightened. Its fingers dug into my skin, pulling me closer to it, pulling me toward the door. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The air around me was thick, suffocating, as if the house itself was trying to swallow me whole. And then I saw it. The door opened. Beyond it, there was nothing, only blackness, endless, impenetrable blackness. The figure leaned in closer, its breath cold against my skin. It's waiting for you, it said, its voice now a hiss, like the sound of something ancient and vile. It's always been waiting for you. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't escape. The blackness was drawing me in, pulling me toward it, and the figure was holding me tighter, its grip like iron. I felt my body move forward, against my will, toward the door, toward the darkness, and then, just as I thought I would be consumed by it, just as I thought I would be lost forever in the void, something snapped. Something inside me broke free. I broke free. I screamed. I shoved the figure away from me, pushing against its cold, twisted form, and in that moment, the darkness seemed to hesitate. It recoiled just for a second. And in that second, I ran. I ran down the stairs, through the hallway, past the rooms, past the shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with every step I took. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The house was alive now, breathing with me, moving with me, as if it were chasing me, urging me to stop, to turn around. I burst through the front door into the cold night air and didn't stop running. I ran until my legs gave out beneath me, until the whispers faded into the distance, until the weight on my chest lifted just enough to let me breathe. But I knew deep down that it wasn't over. It would never be over. I had escaped, but the thing that had worn my cousin's face was still there. It was still waiting for me somewhere, out there, in the dark, and the whispers would always follow, because it had always been watching me, and now it was coming for me.